I stood on the driveway of my own home holding two garbage bags filled with wet clothes while my husband, Victor Holloway, wrapped his arm around his smiling sister, Vivian Cross, telling me that his family needed the main residence more than an exhausted accountant did. The freezing rain burned my skin for a split second, but as I reached into my coat pocket, my fingers touched the heavy leather folder containing the original trust deed and a certified land registry document showing that every single square foot of this property belonged solely to me. I looked Victor dead in the eye and calmly asked him if he realized how fast a luxury lifestyle collapses when the person paying for every single bill simply decides to stop. But before I tell you what happened next and how a quiet financial audit at dawn turned their celebration into an absolute nightmare, tell me, where are you watching this story from tonight? My name is Evelyn Reed. I am 42 years old, and for 9 long years, I served as the invisible load-bearing wall for a family that treated my patience as weakness, completely unaware that the very same woman who built their comfortable world had the legal power to dismantle it in a single morning. For 9 years, I played the role of the silent load-bearing wall in the Holloway household. I was the dedicated corporate financial director who worked 60 hours a week, coming home with sore eyes and aching shoulders, only to take on a second unpaid shift as their permanent domestic benefactor. When Victor and I got married, I foolishly believed that partnership meant shared responsibility, open communication, and mutual respect. Instead, I slowly became a personal automated teller machine for an entire network of entitled adults who treated my hard-earned salary as their collective birthright. Over nearly a decade, I funneled over $4,500 every single month into maintaining their inflated lifestyles. That totals nearly $500,000 of my personal money, built from late nights at the office, skipped vacations, and relentless personal discipline. I paid off Victor's credit card balances whenever his risky side ventures inevitably collapsed, clearing $12,000 in debt after his failed tech consulting firm, and another $15,000 when his real estate speculation went under. I paid the full university tuition, housing fees, parking passes, and monthly allowance for his younger sister, Vivian Cross, who treated her academic years like a permanent holiday while pursuing an art history degree she never finished. When Vivian decided she wanted to become a fashion influencer, it was my bank account that covered her designer handbags, her $3,000 camera setup, and her lease on a brand new luxury SUV. Every single holiday dinner was hosted in my home, paid for with my paycheck, and prepared by my own hands. I would spend 3 full days shopping for groceries and preparing elaborate dinners for 12 relatives, setting the dining room table with pristine china only to sit silently while Victor's aunt criticized the seasoning on the roast, or made passive-aggressive comments about how my demanding corporate career made me an emotionally distant wife. Whenever I tried to bring up budgeting or set reasonable financial boundaries during our Sunday morning coffee, Victor would lean back in his chair, shake his head with a sigh, and deploy the same toxic gaslighting strategy he had perfected over the years. He would tell me that I was being overly emotional, that I was obsessed with bean counting, and that I failed to understand the foundational principles of family solidarity. He constantly reminded me that as a high-earning woman, it was my moral duty to lift up those around me who were less fortunate. What he conveniently left out was that his family was not unfortunate. They were simply skilled parasites who had learned that complaining loud enough was the easiest way to force me to open my checkbook. The double standards were utterly humiliating. When Vivian needed $20,000 to pay off her emergency credit debt after a shopping trip in Paris, Victor transferred the funds immediately from our joint slush account without even asking for my consent. But when I suffered a severe spinal injury 2 years ago and desperately needed 3 weeks of complete bed rest, no one stepped in to support me. In fact, while I was lying in my bedroom with a high fever and prescription painkillers, Victor brought his sister and 4 of her friends over for a noisy weekend getaway. He knocked on my door and asked me to order gourmet catering from my phone and arrange professional housekeepers to clean up after them while they drank wine by my pool. I spent years suppressing my anger, convincing myself that if I just kept working harder and giving more, they would eventually notice my sacrifices and treat me with genuine warmth. I was blind to the truth that when you allow people to treat your generosity as an unconditional obligation, they will never respect you. They will only hate you on the day you decide to lock the vault. The breaking point arrived on a cold Tuesday morning at 5 o'clock, 3 days before Victor's family planned to pack up my belongings and move Vivian into my master suite. I sat alone at my kitchen island with a steaming mug of black coffee, booting up my corporate laptop in the silent house. I had spent 9 years trusting my husband when he assured me that our financial accounts were balanced. But his sudden demand to hand over my private living quarters shattered the illusion forever. My hands were completely steady as I logged into every banking portal, investment broker platform, and county land registry database associated with our names. What I uncovered over the next 3 hours was not a collection of minor accounting mistakes. It was a systematic, calculated scheme of financial fraud designed to bleed me dry while securing their future. The first discovery made my stomach turn. A recurring automated transfer labeled Loan M had been quietly leaving our secondary joint account on the 15th of every month for 4 consecutive years, draining exactly $40,000 directly into a private offshore holding company owned by Vivian. Victor had solemnly sworn to me that this money was going toward experimental medical treatments for his aging father, but the bank transaction log showed that every single wire transfer matched Vivian's luxury shopping excursions in Paris, Milan, and Aspen. Digging deeper into my own firm's corporate credit line, I uncovered 4 forged signatures on high-value authorization forms. Victor had attempted to use my commercial office building as collateral for a high-risk crypto trading venture that had collapsed 3 months earlier. He was actively leveraging my pristine credit score and professional credentials to cover his secret gambling losses while gaslighting me into believing I was the selfish one. A icy calm settled over my chest as I opened a blank spreadsheet to begin a comprehensive forensic audit. Line by line, entry by entry, I mapped out every single dollar that had been siphoned from my personal accounts over the last 9 years. The total sum at the bottom of the spreadsheet was staggering: $486,000 of pure unmitigated theft. But the most dangerous betrayal came when I queried the official county records. Just 6 weeks prior, Victor had submitted a fraudulent deed modification request, attempting to transfer 50% of my inherited estate into an emergency family trust controlled by his sister. He assumed I would never check the public registry because I was an obedient, trusting wife. He forgot that a certified accountant never forgets how to trace a document trail no matter who signed it. I printed out 12 clean copies of the master spreadsheet, attached the certified land registry title that proved my sole ownership, and secured the papers inside a heavy leather folder. Then, with 4 precise clicks of my mouse, I canceled every recurring transfer, revoked all secondary credit cards issued to Vivian and Victor, and locked down my entire investment portfolio under institutional fraud alerts. The automatic teller machine they had relied on for nearly a decade was permanently closed. The aftermath of locking down those accounts was immediate, aggressive, and deeply chaotic. By noon that same day, my corporate phone was vibrating continuously on my desk as dozens of declined transaction notifications poured in from high-end boutiques, luxury day spas, and car dealerships across the city. Victor tried calling me 11 times in less than 20 minutes, his tone shifting from fake concern to raw, unbridled rage when I refused to answer. When I finally walked through the front door of my house that evening, I was met with an orchestrated wall of hostility. Victor was pacing in the entryway alongside his sister Vivian and 2 of their relatives, their expressions twisted with outrage. Victor immediately cornered me in the hallway, shouting that I had humiliated him in front of his associates, demanding to know why his corporate cards were rejected at lunch and why Vivian's monthly allowance transfer had failed to process. Vivian burst into dramatic tears, claiming that her credit card was declined at a high-end restaurant while she was hosting potential clients, calling me a heartless, jealous woman who was intentionally trying to sabotage her career. When I stood my ground, crossed my arms, and calmly informed them that the unlimited funding had permanently ended, Victor switched to the toxic gaslighting tactic he had perfected over nearly a decade of marriage. He stepped into my personal space, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper, telling me that I was losing my mind, that my demanding corporate job was making me emotionally unstable, and that I was suffering from paranoia. He claimed that I was inventing wild financial conspiracies because I was secretly envious of Vivian's youth and creative freedom. Within 2 hours, the pressure campaign expanded across our entire extended family network. A massive barrage of passive-aggressive messages flooded our family group chat of 12 people, accusing me of abandoning my marital duties, being cold-hearted, and hoarding money out of pure spite. Relatives I had not spoken to in months began ringing my personal line, leaving sobbing voicemails about how my bitter behavior was breaking Victor's heart and disrespecting his family. Victor even went so far as contacting 3 of my long-term corporate clients, dropping subtle hints that I was going through a nervous breakdown and might need to take a leave of absence from managing my financial firm. He believed that by threatening my professional reputation and crushing me with social guilt, I would break down, apologize, and quietly restore access to my bank accounts. He tried romantic manipulation as well, showing up at my office with red roses, trying to kiss my cheek while casually sliding refinancing applications onto my desk for me to sign. But every time he opened his mouth to tell me how much he loved me, all I could hear was the cold calculation of a parasite trying to protect his free ride. The hostile environment at home reached a boiling point when they tried to change the locks on my home office, claiming that, until I acted like a supportive wife, I did not deserve a private space in their residence. They truly believed that if they made my daily life unbearable, I would surrender. What they failed to realize was that every insult, every manipulative lie, and every desperate threat only solidified my resolve, proving that I was not dealing with a family but with a nest of extortionists who had mistaken my quiet tolerance for permanent weakness. The turning point arrived late on Thursday afternoon while I was sitting in a quiet corner of a coffee shop near my office, carefully organizing my legal notes. My personal cell phone rang with an unrecognized local number, and when I answered, the calm, measured voice of Julian Ross greeted me. Julian was a 72-year-old veteran estate attorney who had successfully managed my late grandfather's business affairs decades ago and had mostly retired from active trial practice. He explained that he had received an urgent visit earlier that morning from a young woman named Maren Stone, a junior paralegal who had recently been hired by the boutique law firm Victor was using to process his fraudulent title modifications. Maren was actually Victor's distant niece on his mother's side, a quiet young woman whose university application fees and textbook costs I had anonymously paid 6 years ago without ever expecting recognition or repayment. While organizing filing cabinets, Maren had stumbled across the forged land registry documents and unauthorized trust deeds sitting on her senior partner's desk. Recognizing my full name and realizing the massive extent of the betrayal being orchestrated against me, she firmly refused to participate in the illegal enterprise. Instead of remaining silent out of misplaced family loyalty, she secretly duplicated the complete document trail, backed up the internal email correspondence, and downloaded recorded phone conversations between Victor and his corrupt real estate broker. An hour later, I met Julian in his private office, where he placed a thick leather binder tied with ribbon onto the desk between us. Inside were notarized affidavits, forensic wire transfer receipts, and crystal-clear audio recordings in which Victor explicitly detailed his plan to declare me emotionally incompetent, seize full operational control of my estate, and transfer the home title to Vivian before initiating a calculated divorce. Hearing my husband's cold, detached voice on those recordings lay out the step-by-step destruction of my life was like an icy bucket of water poured over my head. but it completely erased every remaining trace of guilt or self-doubt in my heart. Julian leaned over the desk, rested his hands on the binder, and assured me that with these verified records in our possession, we did not merely possess a legal defense, we held an absolute, unchallengeable checkmate that would obliterate Victor's claims in a single swift motion. Maren sat in the corner of the office with tears in her eyes, quietly apologizing for the greed of her relatives and offering to stand as a key witness under oath in court if necessary. For 9 years, I had mistakenly believed I was fighting alone against a ruthless network of people who treated my kindness as weak vulnerability. But looking at Julian and Maren, I realized that true loyalty cannot be bought with monthly wire transfers. It is forged through genuine integrity. With the full legal dossier secured and an airtight strategy prepared, the heavy anxiety that had weighed on my chest for months completely vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp determination to execute absolute justice. The climax did not happen with loud screaming matches in a crowded courtroom or a messy scene at a fancy dinner party. It took place in the silent, soundproof glass conference room of Julian's law firm on a frozen Monday afternoon. Victor and Vivian arrived looking smug and triumphant, fully convinced that I was calling them in to present a desperate financial settlement to save my failing marriage. Victor carried an expensive leather briefcase, casually tossing a set of proposed divorce papers onto the polished oak table, while telling me that if I acted reasonably and signed over 50% of the residential property rights today, he might consider remaining on friendly terms with me. Vivian sat beside him with her arms crossed, smirking quietly as she adjusted her designer coat. I sat completely still at the head of the table, wearing a tailored gray suit, flanked by Julian Ross on my left and Maren Stone on my right. Before I handed over the final legal dossier that would destroy their delusion forever, I looked at Victor and asked myself a fundamental question. Tell me, if you discovered that the person you gave 9 years of your life to was actively planning your complete financial destruction, would you cut them off silently or give them one last chance to confess? I did not offer a single word of warning. Julian simply slid a thin white folder containing 12 crisp pages across the table. Page 1 was the certified forensic audit detailing the $486,000 drained from my personal accounts. Page 2 was the official county registry confirmation proving my absolute, unchallengeable sole ownership of the estate. Pages 3 through 10 contain the bank analysis reports detailing every forged corporate signature, every unauthorized wire transfer to Vivian's offshore account, and the complete certified transcripts of the recorded phone calls between Victor and his corrupt broker. As Victor flipped through the documents, the arrogant smile completely melted from his face, replaced by a sickly, pale terror. Vivian reached over to snatch the papers, but her hands began shaking uncontrollably as she read the bold red notice on the final page. An immediate freezing order on every bank account linked to her name, paired with an official legal intent to file criminal charges for wire fraud and forgery, if full restitution was not initiated within 14 days. Julian leaned forward and explained in a calm, icy tone that a team of private security officers and court bailiffs was currently at my estate, changing every digital lock, installing high-definition security systems, and placing their personal belongings into sealed storage containers parked on the street outside. I looked Victor dead in the eye, unscrewed my fountain pen, and signed the formal eviction orders along with the criminal reporting authorization. He stuttered desperately, begging me to rethink, saying we could work this out as a family, but I held up my hand to stop him mid-sentence. I told him that the bank was permanently closed, the house was sealed, and the load-bearing wall they had exploited for 9 years had finally stepped out of their way. Without waiting for a response, I gathered my coat, thanked Julian, and walked out of the room, leaving Victor and Vivian trapped in the silence of their self-inflicted ruin. 3 months have passed since that icy Monday afternoon in the conference room, and the quiet that has settled over my life is something I had forgotten existed. The legal proceedings were swift and decisive. Faced with undeniable forensic evidence of forgery and wire fraud, Victor surrendered all claims to my property and personal assets in exchange for my agreement not to pursue maximum criminal charges. He was forced to move into a tiny, poorly insulated one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, working long hours at an entry-level sales job just to pay off his mounting legal fees and debt obligations. Vivian had to liquidate her designer wardrobe and sell her luxury vehicle at a loss, taking on 2 retail jobs to cover her own back taxes and unpaid rent. The endless parade of abusive phone calls and guilt-inducing family messages stopped completely the moment they realized that my boundaries were enforced by court orders and security guards rather than words. Marin left her former law firm and now works as a full paralegal in Julian's practice, thriving in an environment where her integrity is respected. As for me, I spent the first few weeks enjoying the simple, profound peace of my own home. I renovated the living space, replacing the dark furniture with light, warm wood, and turned what used to be Victor's private study into a bright, peaceful library overlooking the garden. Every morning, I sit on my quiet porch with a hot cup of coffee, breathing in the fresh air without the crushing weight of anxiety that used to paralyze my chest. Living through this betrayal taught me a lesson that no business degree or financial success could ever impart. Those who applaud you for being a strong, selfless, load-bearing wall are usually the very same people who have decided they will never carry their own weight. Generosity should be a choice born of love, never an obligation forced through emotional manipulation. And setting strict boundaries is not an act of selfishness, but the ultimate declaration of self-respect. If you ever find yourself being manipulated into giving up your peace to fund someone else's comfort, remember my story. Look at the legal deeds in your life and never be afraid to show them whose name is actually on the title.